Well, hello, community creatives and kind folks out there. This is DBJ. Um, Normally, I go live at this time, but I wanted to give you guys a little something. Unfortunately, I've been called into work early, and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging out there. But yesterday, we kind of diverged off. We talked about chases and, chases across different landscapes and whether it's modern day or fantasy or something. So I thought I would try something a little bit different, just give you a combination of me giving you something for today and give you a little sneak peek, not really a sneak peek, but like a page through of a number of the cinematic environs that is my brainchild, is that I've done the majority of the writing for, along with Alex and Rob for Critical Hit Publishing. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the theme of the cinematic environs, what it is that I'm passionate about, and why it is that I feel like chases and chase scenes are kind of underutilized in games, and in general, just using that third pillar, that the exploration of RPGs. So it's a combination of all of those. So if you're listening to this, I'm going to, of course, speak through it. So you can just listen in if you wish. If you can see this, you will see that you won't see my face, of course, but you will see myself paging through a number of the portions of the cinematic environs. Now, this particular book, let's get back to the top. This particular book, here's my name, the name of the product. This particular one is called Plains and Grasslands. Thought about using like Savannah, but it was a little too specific because we wanted to talk about all of the most boring portion of just about any fantasy setting. Hell, even a modern or sci-fi setting is like that flat place between the adventure and where you're trying to go and you're trying to get to. And I took up the challenge. It was like, there's some interesting things we can do here. This isn't just flyover land, so I think there's something we can do with this. I know that I do have a video that talks a little bit about the plains, but I just wanted to give you a little something before I head off to work early. Otherwise, I would be broadcasting from, like, I don't know, maybe my cell phone in a car or something. It just wouldn't work out right. So anyway, of course, here we have all the writing and the rules development and all that kind of stuff here on this page. Myself, it's DBJ, Captain Gothnog, and the Swamper, or rather, Devabrian, Alex, and Rob. So here we go with the introduction. All of our books start out with an introduction explaining the rule of three. The rule of three for us, concerning the cinematic environs, basically talks about how many roles are you advocating it takes to achieve something or resist something. The more roles it takes for your players to resist something, the greater chance they have of failure. And the inverse works for resisting something. So if it takes 3 particular statistic rolls or saving throws to resist something, there's a greater chance of failure rather than 1 roll. So it essentially just talks about, for example, suppose a player wants their character to snatch a tapestry from the wall, throw it over an orc guard, and then push them out of an open window. In a realistic setting, that player may have to roll to snatch down the carpet, another roll to hit the orc, and yet another roll to knock them over. In a gritty game, the game master may ask for a roll to cover the guard and another to knock them prone. And in a cinematic world, a single roll is all that is needed to give the orc a blanket party and send it on its way to oblivion. So we talk about the differences between realistic, cinematic, and gritty. And of course, we have ourselves on how do you use an environment, a cinematic environment. And we tend to default to using lots of conditions. So we do have a reprint of some of those conditions, specifically the ones that are often used in our cinematic environment. So we have a number of unique conditions. specifically in this book, we talk about some mental conditions: despair, traveling for long distances and being on your own, being lost, hungry, harried by enemies, by predators, and things of that nature, becoming sick. And so we have things like catatonic and distracted, and we talk about advantage and disadvantage, hypothermia, exhaustion, the exhausted levels, being incapacitated or numb, paralyzed, paranoid, forgetful. So those things are mental conditions. And just as exhaustion has various levels of exhaustion from 1 to 6, there are also mental exhaustion levels from 1 to 6. So we do have frightened, hallucinations, falling prone. Here we have restrained, shaken, shocked, stunned, falling unconscious. And of course we have ourselves some flavorful artwork here. And of course, when we talk about plains and grasslands, of course it's not absolutely flat. So we will talk about hills and those kind of things. So we start with plains conditions, and these are like regional pressures. These are things that no matter what the planar type, not interdimensional, but literally planes that you're on, these are some of the things that you may be encountering that cover everything. Usually it's basically a blanket over the entire area, and it's usually not very temporary. It's something that will happen with everyone. So we talk about dehydration and exposure to the elements, and then we have a weather chart, when to use the weather chart, how does it change, that kind of thing. And some hints, and one of the main things that we try to put together in this books are, first of all, we just want to give you hints on things that you can do to flavor your world. So, when it's cold, do frozen potions, do potions freeze solid? When it's windy, will your map get snatched away? And those kind of things. We want to talk about those things that may or may not have a gaming effect, but will flavor the world and alter how your players, just role-playing techniques. So we do have weather conditions. We talk about everything from severe thunderstorms and blizzards to drizzling, freezing rain and snow flurries, whiteout and fog, and some various advantages, disadvantages, modifications, and of course a little blurb like, hey, if you want to know more, go to pick up desert environs. If you want to know more, pick up Arctic reaches, that kind of thing. And then percentages for the weather conditions, depending on whether it's an arid location or a savanna, whether it's winter, spring, summer, or autumn, and the percentages of what goes on, percentages that a particular weather event will happen. For example, there's almost no chance that there will be, snowstorms in certain areas, but some of the elements are very the same. For example, thunderstorms, snowstorms, and sandstorms kind of run the same way as far as gaming mechanics go. So sure, there's a chance that there could be a sandstorm in a very arid place, but no chance of a snowstorm. Here we have a little blurb on how to designing an open air adventure. For example, I mentioned one barrier to using open fields and mounted combat is this idea that a horse or centaur cannot operate in a dungeon. What does a player do with a loyal steed after entering a cave? The answer to mounts and dungeon crawls is simple. Instead of a dungeon crawl, create an open air place of adventure. While a classic dungeon has halls, rooms, and secret doors deep underground, the same goes for open air dungeons, but the scale is much larger. So it's just basically my way of saying, yeah, you can design an open air dungeon. It's just basically no roof over the top, and just use larger, tend to use larger scopes. So instead of one pit trap, because you're a fan of pit traps, maybe they go through an area that has a number of hazards that present themselves as pits to fall into, or they could be man-made by, say, settlers or tribalists that have put maybe dozens or more of pit traps in the area, and so the players may be harried by coyotes or dingoes or winter wolves and such, and so they may come across a number of pit traps, and that may be quote unquote a 3-mile room in your dungeon till they come across maybe a thick tree line that the wolves do not cross to go to the next air quotes room. So anyways, there's tricks to drawing in flying creatures, because flying creatures have a huge advantage over the planes. And so we talk about attacking them, how people tribes people deal with them, people that live out on the plains. So we'd have to talk about camouflage, lures, and absolute patience. And talk about we also go into ranged combat and of extreme ranges, and then flying creatures in open spaces. Now we go into mental stress and using mental stress, the option of using mental stress in your games, and mental stress having the effects of like exhaustion, except it happens with the mind. And where mental stress comes into effect, ways for you to use it, whether you're running a cinematic, gritty, or realistic game, and how often mental stress may come into effect, if at all, and then mental stress levels. And if you can see this, if you're watching this, you'll notice that on the mental stress levels, there are options. So for example, mental stress level 1, you can either become shaken or shocked. Mental stress level 2, you could become distracted or forgetful. Mental stress level 3, you become numb or paranoid. And then 4, 5, and 6 are singular: hallucinations, frightened, or catatonic. And as you move up or down the mental stress level, you replace your old mental stress level with your new one. So on mental stress, as you gain levels of mental stress, they do stack. As you reduce those stress levels, you just replace one with the other. So you can become shocked, and then you go from shocked to maybe distracted, and then you get 2 levels. Now you're starting to suffer hallucinations, but you've taken some kind of rest, or someone has alleviated your mental faculties. So then you move up to, say, forgetful instead, and then you replace from one to the other. Then we go into planes hazards. Of course, we have some flavor text to put you in the mood of what is going on. And we come into our hazards. And these hazards are things that you can come across, but do not cover the entire plains. We have ourselves brambles. Brambles are things like tangleroot, kudzu, landvines, thorny bush, chiggers, all those kind of things. Just nasty. I don't really want to touch that plant life. And we talk about all the kind of hazards there, how to get through it, cutting through it, and things thereof. There's in each chapter, we do talk about changes. We have ourselves, let's go back up here. Sorry. We have ourselves pressure, and pressure basically is the method for you as a game master, a tool for you to use to basically have your PCs encounter it. Some PCs are just, adverse to danger, and they may just look at it and go, yeah, we're not going in there. And so pressure is a way for you to encourage your players to make the choice to, hey, maybe we should enter this dangerous area. Then we also have ourselves an if-then, and if-then exactly means exactly what it sounds like. If the players do something specific, then this effect happens, and it's putting the idea of danger in the hands of your players. Then we have ourselves changes, and changes are a way for you to change the particular hazard, whether it's creating acres of them, maybe there are briars, or maybe the plants are reactive or poisonous. And then lastly, we do have, at the end of many of our chapters, we have a fumble crit. A fumble crit sounds like what it if you use fumbles in your game using a d20 and you roll a 1, this is an option to roll on this to have a fumble happen to them. And the crit portion of it is if you use crits in your game. Someone rolls a 20 or whatever the crit range is for that PC or even enemy, maybe this is an additional thing that happens to the target. So here under brambles, we have a lethal choke, entangled legs, a face plant, caught, marked by scent, pulled under. So those are various things. We're going to go on a little quicker here. We have broken earth. And flavor text, of course, changes and pressures in it. We talk about heat exhaustion, heat stroke, oil slicks, the high sun, heat lightning, tar pits are possibilities. Here we have burial grounds, and you can create burial grounds for especially useful for those people who want to put in like undead, ghouls and ghast and wraiths and wights, skeletons and zombies, vampires and such out in the plains, in the burial grounds. And having those burial elements, dangers happen to them. Looks like, there we go. All right. And these you can create randomly by having a random method to get through this horrific location and what kind of effects they have, and what happens when they either fail a save or fail to perform a ritual to get through it. So instead of just having various saving throws, they can perform a ritual to resist the Umbra, which could be anything from closing their eyes, or repeating a chant, or spreading salt in front of them, or something like that, holding up a holy symbol, rather than just straight up having a saving throw. And that will allow more role-playing opportunities. So there's a possibility that someone can, let's say they go through a burial ground and skeletal hands try to reach up and grab their limbs. Maybe if they close their eyes tight, they can ignore the skeletal limbs that are formed from protoplasm or something like that. But if you get scared, you're being attacked. But of course you have your eyes closed, so if you're being attacked by something else that's above the ground, it's all about creating hazards. We have here ourselves burning fields. Of course, we have a little artwork of things burning and things, and we talk about the pressures of pushing your players into that situation, and why would they even go into burning fields. We talk about navigation and smoke. Smoke has two components that adventurers must confront: vision and breathing. And so we talk about the visual hazards, navigation through a fire and getting trapped inside of a major flash fire, burning fields and blistering heat. And of course we have ourselves a fumble crit. Whether you get a lung full of soot, smell of smoke on your clothing, start to suffer dry heaves, suffer a collapsed lung, a constant cough, blinded by ash, set on fire, confused, raw throat, tearing eyes, unable to breathe, all of those things. For example, if someone suffers a raw throat, cannot verbalize for 1d4 minutes. And that's just them. That means that this may affect spells that require verbal components, communication, yelling out for help, all of those things. Here we have chromatic fields. I like to throw something in that's a little mystical for your 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Chromatic fields are like basically flowers of specific colors that have strange effects. And of course, PCs will want to gather some of those flowers, but many of them are dangerous. Black spores, gray spores, green and blue, browns and oranges, pinks and whites, and all those kind of things, yellow, purple. How to remove the spores, methods of curing yourself from being infected by breathing in those spores or having them touch your skin, such as acid, alcohol, brine, charcoal, milk, urine and water, and removing such things. And of course they are options, or you can just roll randomly. We have flash floods and flood plains, which is a hazard on the plains. Having those things, come on, no. All right, let's see if we can, come on, computer. Yeah, I know there was a problem loading the page. I have a stream going on here. Come on, computer. Seriously? Are you seriously going to do this to me? All right. I guess not. All right, fog. Fog is a thing. Let it be said that dark vision does not help in fog. It doesn't allow you to see through moisture particulates in the air. Yeah, that's not a thing. But we talk about light fog, patchy fog, heavy fog, and that kind of stuff. And what is this? Herds? Yeah, herds. You can make up your own herds. Rules about herds. Hiding in a herd. Herds that occupy zones. What kind of cover does it give you when you're inside of a stampeding herd? Is it maybe you can have conflicts where you're fighting enemies inside of a herd, or maybe you want to run along with the herd, or use the herd as cover stealth-wise and to protect yourself if someone's flinging arrows or spell slinging at you. And then we talk about the damage that they do, how thick the herd is, or widespread the herd is, and creating your own herds, especially for your fantasy realms. Examples of types of animals that they could represent, their size from small to gargantuan, herd movement, special abilities, whether it's incredible leaping, blindingly fast, they're slow but enduring, or they're natural swimmers, things like that, marathon runners, or climbing abilities like maybe goats. I'm thinking of their color or their fur, what kind of their herd hide patterns, what kind of things they use to defend themselves, whether it's like a thick cranial bone or they use their hind legs for kicking or sharp spines. And some herds have unique abilities like predatory paranoia, extreme sensory range, sensitive to magic, maybe pack tactics, bestial calls out to each other, or maybe even predict the weather as a natural event. Here we go again with hills and valleys, yet another hazard, especially if you're having chases. Hills and valleys, we talk about the high ground and angled cover, and then we go into our if-thens, and that we talk about the heights of hills, types of hills. We have changes, whether it's loose stone or shifting earth, tunnels and caves. The angle of the hills, whether they are very low, such as ramps, a rise or a ridge, and what effect that has. And then we have ourselves some caves inside, whether they're tiny creatures like badgers, ferrets, groundhogs, or jackrabbits, all the way up to ourselves some larger creatures like giant boar, giant hyena, a boulet, land sharks, dire badgers, and things of that nature. Even small creatures like dire weasels, coyotes, goblins, or jackals in your open plains. We have ourselves some flavor, whether you have arid hills, and then of course we have our fumble crit. What happens if you fall down the hill? Go ahead and get your crit on that orc raider on the hills, and maybe they get their neck snapped, or their back is broken, knocked unconscious, suffer a concussion, become dizzy, confused, suffer a nasty spill, a sprain, or become disarmed. Really cool. Sometimes I love to have fun with the fumble crits. It's just really fun. But anyway, we talk about rivers and streams and walking through them. Also tall grasses and using them as stealth, but also trying to navigate your way through it. Maybe losing sight of your allies while you're going through the tall grasses, or even having conflict in tall grass and being unable to find your allies while you're in the tall grasses. We talk about wind and weather, such as breezes and gusts and wind shear, rain, torrential rain and thunderstorms and effects like that. Rain, of course, torrential rain causes visual hazards and can reduce light sources and put out fires, things like that. We also go down into winter's wrath. We talk about cold and frostbite, the pressure of having to travel through those areas, thick snow, tripping hazards, blizzards, ice, frozen lakes, hidden crevices, and all those kind of things. Freezing liquids. Most common liquids will freeze solid in Arctic climates. The GM must decide if the liquid can still be used once melted, or if it has any reduced effects. Note that most glass containers will break if the liquid freezes inside, especially if there's a topper on it, and the liquid is like right up at the top of the topper. Flames can melt snow and ice, although once the heat is removed, additional hazards may be created with slick icy surfaces. So we have ourselves a fumble crit, of course. Victim falls prone. Becomes lost. Hands become frostbitten and numb. Objects in their hands are dropped and cannot be picked up until warmed and rested. The hands cannot be used for manual manipulation, like using a sword, picking a lock, or casting a spell. That's different. And of course, we got a problem with loading these pages. I don't know. So we do have a planes runner. At the end of all of our cinematic environs, we have a new background, of course, appropriate to that particular region. So in mountains, we have the mountaineer. And of course, in this one, we have plains runner because they're on plains. And we have new weapons, or not necessarily new, but we do have like lasso and bolo, the boomerang, and the properties thereof, a meteor hammer, spring loaders, and of course, picture boomerang, lasso. There we go, boomerang, meteor hammer. And we go down into the appendix, a new creature, Chalak. And another new creature, an evil Grootslang. A Grootslang. Let's take a look a little closer to this. If you take a look, we have ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tusks. Trunks on an elephant. That's strange. Of course, it's strange because they're evil. They're little bastards. They're neutral evil. You can imagine that. They're pretty intelligent too. They got intelligence of 10. They have their own language. 10% chance to speak common. Pretty weird. Of course, we have ourselves like a plains worm. Gotta have some worms. And we get into the appendix, random details. This is really something I really want to show you guys, that in terms of having chases and having random elements, this entire section is basically one big way for you to add random elements so that you don't just have to describe your plains as, oh, it's just grassy or it's just flat and you're 80 miles away. You can have things whether you want to use chariots, mounted riding on dinosaurs, horses, elephants, ostriches or something. You want to play more of a tribalized 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons world where they have a chase, whether you want to do something that's far more classically Western style with 6 guns and gun shooters, or maybe you don't want to use those, you just want to use crossbows, but essentially it's the same thing, going across the open plains and undiscovered country that's flat under the, you're thinking of your classic Arizona or Grand Canyon areas and things, Utah, Nevada, those places, Montana, big sky country. And so these are some things that you can have during a chase where these are elements that they can come across. So we have ourselves some randomizers, using, and basically just take these, use these as much as you want, from boulder gardens, tumbleweed, dangerous tumbleweed, like you can get trapped in the tumbleweed, snatched up and rolled away on the wind, blade grass, boneyards, depressions in the ground, not mental depression, dust bowls, pits, pollen clouds, erosion stones, dust bowls, erosion stones, like those smooth stones you can kind of like trip and fall on and break your ankle. You might not want to ride your horse across something like that. Prickly plants, fallen logs, haven trees, spines, like a sharp spine across the world. It's like a hill, but it goes up to a point. Rocky plateaus, insect mounds, knotted groves. Don't want to go too fast. Shallow streams, tangle vines, tunnel havens, etc., etc. And then we have ourselves random flavors, whether they're horizon details, they may lead to other adventures. For example, here we go. A funnel cloud touches down on the horizon, lifting mature trees like confetti. Make a survival skill check to find the shelter or take necessary precaution to save allies. And et cetera. We have ephemeral details, natural details, constructed landmarks, animal details, and of course, it's not going to Not going to show. And then we get to the, there we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Animal details. And then we get to the very end. So anyway, this is just an example of course, legal information and such. We have to put that in there. But anyway, I just wanted to show you guys something. Let me stop sharing this and go back to my face. So I just wanted to show you guys something that an example of what a cinematic Environ is, talk about chases, share something with you, and not leave you guys out there hanging on a Friday when I get ready for work and have to get there soon. So guys, thank you very much for being patient with me. I apologize for this. There is real life. For a person who goes live, you know, on a demi-daily deep dive Monday through Friday, these things will happen. So I apologize for that. I will try to make a queue of these things. This is coming up at the last minute. Oh, I don't like that. But thank you very much for participating. This is RPG with DBJ. If you want to look up the cinematic environments or anything that I'm doing, go down to doobly-doo below. Tomorrow I will be doing a live stream from 6 to 7. Please tell me I won't have to cancel it or change the time. But anyway, that will be far more specific in the cinematic environments and how to use them in the game using that third pillar, because I am your self-appointed third pillarist. I'm DBJ. Guys, have a good one. Thank you.